Okay, lesson 7, vocabulary review. What property states that if A equals B, then A times C equals B times C? Who has this answer? Uche. It looks kind of like commutative property, but it's not. Commutative means you're changing the order of multiplication. That's not what we have here. Christian? Associative? It's not associative property. Timothy? I don't see any parentheses there. Olamide? Nope, we already said that. Caleb? I don't see multiplying by 1. Abu, what do you think it was?
I was going to say distributive, and now I'm trying.
Oren, help us out. Right, and why'd you say, and that's correct, multiplication property of equality. Why'd you say that? Very good, Oren. Right, so you have A equals B, and then look over here. You're multiplying both sides by the same thing, right? That's what multiplication property of equality says. You're going to treat both sides of the equation equally, and you're going to multiply both sides by the same thing. So it's multiplication property of equality, okay? Okay, who's got this answer here? Fatima. Nice, very good. So that's the first step. You're going to divide both sides by 4, okay? And then what happens?
The 4 from 4B cancel each other out.
Right, they cancel out. What do they become?
They become 0.
Not 0. What's 4 divided by 4?
0.
4 divided by 4 is not 4, it's 1, okay? And what's 24 divided by 4 going to become? Right. And then 1 times B, what's 1 times B? B. So this step right here, you're knowing that it cancels, so mentally, you know, but I need you to understand what it becomes, because that's going to be important later. Okay, so who's got this problem over here? Somebody I haven't heard from? Joshua, go ahead. Very good. So we're going to divide both sides by -4. That is the multiplication property of equality, or actually that's the division property of equality. We're dividing both sides by the same thing. Okay, and what's the next step, Joshua? What is this? What's -4 divided by -4 become?
1.
Right. And then 20 divided by -4, what's that going to become? Negative. Did you guys get caught on that and you forgot to make it a negative? Okay, I have a positive 20 divided by a -4. They're different signs. When you divide by different signs, you get a negative back. And then what's 1 times D, Joshua? So 1 times D is just D. D equals -5. Okay, so next problem. Who wants to take care of this one? Olamide, what's the first step here? Right, so I'm going to take the equation. I'll multiply 4 from both sides. So I multiplied 4 over here. But over here, I need to change my integer 4 into something, right? What do I need to change it into? What is this right here? So how do I rewrite 4 as a fraction? Right. So we're going to multiply that side by 4 over 1, which is 4, this side by 4. And then what does this simplify to become? So 4 over 4, they go away, then k over 1. So 4k over 4, which is going to simplify to 1, k over 1. -16 divided by times 4 is going to be what? When I multiply a negative times a positive, what do I get back? -64, very good. So here's what we have, and then k divided by 1 is just going to be k, so k equals -64. Are we good? Everybody understand this problem? Very good, Olamide. You have a question, Caleb?
Isn't that supposed to be a positive?
No, because we have a -16, and a -16 times a +4 gives us a -64. Okay, when we multiply or divide by different sign numbers, we get a negative back. Okay, and then the last problem, could I get a volunteer for the last problem? Abu, go ahead.
Okay, so multiply inside by 6.
We're going to multiply both sides by 6, so I multiply the right-hand side by 6, but this side I got to change my 6 into something else, right? 6 over 1, because that's a fraction that's equal to 6. And now I have these two fractions that I multiply. What do I get back?
You get 1h.
I get h over 1, and then over here, -3 times 6.
Negative, it
Very good, negative 18. And then h divided by 1 is just h. Any questions about the warm-up? Are we good? So this is a review. These are one-step equations, ladies and gentlemen. And a lot of you are trying to solve things mentally. We're not going to be doing one-step equations all year. So I'm trying to get you guys ready for things to come. All right, so moving along. I'm going to go ahead and read this just because we're trying to make the video for the day. What you'll learn to solve two-step equations using inverse operations. Why learn this? Detectives often retrace steps to find missing information. You can use this strategy, work backward, to solve two-step equations and find an unknown quantity. You can solve a two-step equation by using inverse operations and the properties of equality to get the variable on one side of the equation. For many equations, you can undo addition or subtraction first. Then you can multiply or divide to get the variable alone. Okay, so here's my example. Do you guys remember last week I said, hey, when you're solving equations, you need to work backwards, PEMDAS. Do you guys remember that? So the first thing you have to always look for to undo first is what? Add or subtract. So the book is saying, hey, do undo subtraction or addition first. That's what I told you last week. But really, you're working backwards of PEMDAS. Do you guys understand? So if you know PEMDAS, please excuse my Aunt Sally. When we're solving equations, we're going backwards of that. So the first thing we need to look for, do we have an addition or subtraction? Well, do we have an addition or subtraction in this equation? So what's the first thing I need to undo? Subtract what? Class, subtract what?
33 minus
Subtract what?
18.
No, we got to look at the side of the variable. This is the other thing I noticed about the quizzes. You're going to focus on the side that has a variable, okay? Sometimes the variable's on the left-hand side, sometimes it's on the right-hand side. Sometimes it'll be on both, but we're not to that yet. So right now we're just going to talk about which side has my variable, the left-hand side, right? Yeah. So just look at the left-hand side. Do you have an add or subtract on the left-hand side? I have a subtract what?
18.
I have a subtract 18. So I have to undo minus 18. And how do I undo minus 18? I'm going to add 18 to both sides. Do you guys understand that? Is everybody with me on that step? Okay, now that I'm adding 18 to both sides, what property is that again? Where you add something to both sides of the equation? You're treating both sides of the equation equally?
Adding addition, property of equality.
Addition, property of equality. So that's what we're doing right here. So when we apply the additional property of equality and we add 18 to both sides, what do we get back?
36 minus 30.
Well, let's tackle what I think is the easy part. What's negative 18 plus 18?
36.
Negative 18 plus 18? 0, because they're different signs and they're opposites, so I get 0 back. So what am I left with on this side of my equation?
5n.
Just 5n. Now here's, to me, what is a little more challenging, but it's review, and I think it's challenging because some of you guys are still confused about. When I have different signs, am I taking the sum or am I taking the difference? I'm going to take the difference. What's the difference of 18 and 33?
Negative 15.
It's going to be 15. And we keep the sign of the larger magnitude. Which number is farther away from 0, negative 33 or positive 18? Right, so 15, and we're going to keep the sign that's with 33, so it's going to be negative 15. Does everybody understand this step? Okay. Now, we know 5n plus 0, what's that? It's just 5n. That's the identity property of addition. Okay, and now this looks a lot like my warm-ups, right? How do I undo what I see with n? What's going on with n? I have n's multiplied to 5, so how do we undo multiply by 5? We're going to divide both sides by 5. And what property is that where we divide both sides by 5?
Division property.
Division property of what? Of equality. Very good. Now, what's 5 divided by 5 going to become? 1. And what's negative 15 divided by positive 5 going to become? Very good. Negative 3. And then what's 1 times n? N. Excellent. Now, as a habit, it's a good habit. Check your work. You don't need the back of the book now when solving equations. You're just going to substitute your answer into your equation. So here's my equation. We're going to check it. I'm going to replace my n with what? Not 3. Be careful. It's negative 3. When I simplify that, what's 5 times negative 3? Negative 15. Negative 15 minus 18 is going to be same signs. Add them. Keep the sign. Negative 33. Are we good? Okay, now I need you guys to really quickly on your own solve this equation. Try this one, solve it on your own. Can everybody see that? Better? Alexis, give me homework. Turn in. Nice. Good. You're working there. Look, they're opposites. Zero. Okay. You got anything? Anything? Okay. Good. Good. Nice. Good. I'm noticing something good. Make sure it's right.
Mr. Heatherly,
Yes.
this young lady needs to stay with you for the rest of this period, please. Thank you.
Joshua, can you switch the exam? Thank you, Joshua. Okay, many of you are using the strategy that I started teaching last week. That's good. You're going to find that the quiz tomorrow is not going to be too tough. For those of you who are working through doing opposite, I think you'll be fine. Let's go ahead. Who wants to walk us through this example? Alexis, what's the first thing we need to do? Right. So the first thing we're looking for in a two-step equation is we have to look for an add or subtraction, right? And in this equation, do we have an add or subtraction with the variable? We have a subtract what? What are we subtracting from negative 8y? What do we subtract in the equation? Look, it's right there. Just to read what we subtracted. Right here. On this side of my variable, I have a subtraction, right? I'm subtracting 28 from negative 8y. So I need to undo subtract 28, and what you said was we need to add 28 to both sides. So what property of equality is that? When we add the same thing to both sides and we treat each side of the equation equally, it's what? Somebody help her out. Can I get a volunteer to help her out? Ola, shh.
Addition property of equality.
Addition property of equality says we got to treat both of my sides of my equation the same, so we're going to add 28 to both sides. When I add 28 to both sides, what happens to my left-hand side? What's over here on my left-hand side? Right, negative 8y minus 0 or plus 0. It doesn't matter because add 0, minus 0, it doesn't matter. And then minus 38 plus 28, what do I get back? You got back 8? What sign wins when we talk about the sign that we want to keep? Which one's farther away from the origin? What's that? Is 36, negative 36 farther from 0? Or is 28 farther from 0? Right. So we're going to keep the sign of 36, which is negative. So the answer is going to be a negative 8. Okay? So that's some review. Now, what is negative 8y plus 0? It's just negative 8y. So I got negative 8y equals negative 8. Now I got to get rid of something. What's the next thing to get rid of? I got to keep looking at the side that's got the y. I need to get that y by itself. So what's going on with y and the other number with it? Okay. Right. So I have a negative 8 times y, and so I got to do the opposite. I got to undo multiply by negative 8. So we're going to do what? Divide both sides by negative 8. And that, what property is that? Shh. What property is that, Alexis? Of equality. Very good. And what happens when I divide negative 8 divided by negative 8? I get 1, because a negative divided by a negative is a positive. And then 8 divided by 8 is 1, so I got positive 1y. And then negative 8 divided by negative 8 again is 1. And then what's 1 times y? Right. So you guys got the same thing? Yes. Okay. Now, it's a good habit. It's a good habit to check your work. So here's my equation. We're going to check it. I'm going to replace y with 1. Negative 8 times 1 is negative 8. So I get negative 8 minus 28. Well, same signs, you add them and keep the sign. That's going to be negative 36 equal negative 36. So when we check our work, our answer is the solution works. It's a true statement. Okay. Here's what I need you to do next. Solve this equation. We're going to undo by subtraction or addition first. Again, go ahead. I need you to not do this mentally. I need you to try and do it on a piece of paper and work it out. You guys realize on the quiz it's going to require you to show your steps. And if you don't show your steps, I'm not giving you points. I don't care if you have the right answer. It's telling you to show your steps, explain your steps. If you don't do those things, you're not getting those points. Right now is the time for you to practice that. A number of you are starting to learn this. And I don't know, whatever the reason was, if you never learned it in the past, you're starting to get it. I can see it when I look at the quizzes. It's starting to sink in. So we need to try to iron this out today so that when we take the quiz tomorrow, you're good to go. Some of you might notice, if you take care of the first step, then you have something that looks very similar to the warm-up. Okay. I'm going to walk through this first example with you. So for the first example, does anybody have it? It's not any different than the first two examples we just worked out. What's the first thing I need to do? Fatima.
Since it's addition, you need to subtract
right? So we look at this side that's got my variable. Here's the side with my variable. Don't care how messy it looks. Just ask yourself, on the side of the variable, is there addition or subtraction? And there is. There's add 11, right? So we need to undo add 11. So what are we going to do? Subtract 11. And we're not just going to do it to one side. We're going to do both sides. What's that property? Subtraction property of equality. So here's subtraction property of equality. We're subtracting 11 from both sides. What's next? What's this side going to become?
It's going to become 0.
Right, so a positive 11 minus 11 becomes 0, but what's 16 minus 11 going to become? 5. So does everyone understand this step? This didn't change, but this part right here became a 0. Are we good? Okay. But now we have this fraction x divided by 3 plus 0. Well, what's anything plus 0? The same thing. So this fraction, here we go. That's what we got. Does everyone understand that step? Now, this looks a lot like a warm-up, right? We're working backwards. We're going from a two-step equation to a one-step equation. How do I isolate my variable next?
You have to multiply both sides.
Very good. So we're going to use multiplication property of equality because we have x divided by 3, right? So we're going to multiply both sides by what?
3.
Right. So on this side, we're going to multiply by 3. And then on this left-hand side, am I going to multiply by 3? I'm going to multiply by 3 over 1, which is equal to 3. That's a fraction equal to 3. And then what's 5 times 3 going to become?
15.
And then we know this over here is going to become what?
1.
X over 1. And then x over 1 is just going to be x equals 15. Okay? Any questions about that one? All right. If you want to check and verify that for yourself, I'm going to cut some corners and go to this next problem. Do you guys need some more time to work out this next problem?
Yes, please.
Okay. You guys take a few more minutes to try to complete this equation. Solve this equation. That's the only thing you have to write with the permanent marker. Why don't you see if somebody else will just something else besides the permanent marker. You have something else? I know there's a lot of nice students in this class, so we're glad we let you borrow some materials.
Please pardon the interruption. Mr. Richards, please report to room 205. Mr. Richards to room 205. Thank you.
Okay, the work I'm looking at looks a little bit better. Most of you are starting to step it up and show you your work. You're going to need to do that for tomorrow if you want to do well. Do you guys need a little more time? Okay, let's go ahead and go over this. I want to go through the last few examples. Okay, so who can walk us through this example? Somebody I haven't heard from yet would be nice. Uche, thank you. Go ahead. What's the first step?
First you subtract 35 on each side.
Right. So the first step, subtract both sides by 35. That's the subtraction property of equality. We're treating both sides the same. And then what does that give me back when I subtract both sides by 35?
Becomes 0 and
Okay.
35 becomes 40.
Very good. So here's what we got. These are opposites. When you take the sum of opposites, you get 0 back. And then I have x divided by 5 still equals 40. Very good. Now again, here's the rule. Different signs, you take the difference, and you keep the sign of the larger number. That's a positive, so that's a positive 40. We don't have to put a positive number in front of it, just so you understand. And then what's x divided by 5 plus 0 going to become, Uche?
X divided by 5
Right, so it's just going to be x divided by 5 equals 40. Because when we add, that's the identity property of addition. If you add 0 to something, it doesn't change it. If you subtract 0 from something, it doesn't change it. Now, here's my equation. How do I isolate my variable now? What's the next step, Uche?
You multiply 5 on each side.
Right,
So
because we have x divided by 5, we're going to multiply both sides by 5. That's a multiplication property of equality. And on this side, we're going to multiply by 5 also, but we're going to turn it into a fraction, 5 over 1. And when we do that, what do we get on the right-hand side of my equation?
we get 200.
200, right? And then the left-hand side, when we multiply and simplify that down, becomes x over 1, which is just x equals 200. Are we good? Any questions about this problem? Okay, I'm going to go ahead and move to the next example. Now, I'm going to read this. Solving two-step equations. On weekday afternoons, a local bowling alley offers a special. Each bowling game costs $2.50, and shoe rental is $2. You spend $14.50 total. What is the number of games that you bowled? So, are you gonna pay for shoe rentals every game? No, you just need to rent them once, and you're good to go for the day while you're there, right? So, so how are we going to figure this out? We know my total, right? Anybody have a guess? Christian, go ahead.
7.
You think it's 7 games? I don't know about that. So you're mentally trying to solve. Let's try to set up my equation first. Miles in the back, what do you think? What's going on? What are you going to multiply? What do we not know? What are we missing? Right, I'm going to give that n. Number of games n. Now let's think about what they set up here, right? $2.50. We know the rental is $2, and we know our bill at the end of our day at the bowling alley was $14.50. How am I going to set that up? No, not going to multiply 250 by 14. Olamide, what am I going to multiply 250 by?
You're going to multiply 250 by n.
Right. Every game that we play, n, we're going to multiply it to 250, right? And then that's how much you pay for the games. But that's not all we paid for, right? What did we pay for? So it's 250 n, and then what? Oren, help out. Plus $2, which is what? The shoe rental. And all that's going to equal our total bill, right? $14.50. So when we recreate this into my equation, there's what we have. Can you guys really quickly solve that equation? Really quickly. Everybody knows what the first step is, right? Ola, what's the first step? Right, so we're going to subtract 2 from both sides. Now, if you forgot, look at what I did to help us out with that. What did I do with the right-hand side? Do you guys see what happened? I'm still subtracting by 2, right? But if you guys remember, when we add or subtract decimals, we have to line up our decimals. So this is why the way I'm showing you is a little different than the book, because you can subtract in the problem. So what's 5 minus 0? 4 minus 2? And then 1. So here's what we have over here. Take the difference, keep the sign of the larger number, so it's a positive 12 and 5/10. Did everybody get to that point?
Yeah.
Okay, that's the easy step, right? Okay, now we know 2 and 5/10 n plus 0. Well, that's just going to be 2 and 5/10 n, right? Who knows what the next step is? Amani, what's the next step? Nice. We're going to divide both sides by 2.5. Okay, that's division property of equality. And then these things are the same. When we divide the same thing, what do we get back? We get back 1. And then, did anybody work out 12.5 divided by 2.5? Do you guys remember when you do long division? You move the outside number outside the house decimal over, and then however many places inside, same, right? So who got that? Caleb?
I got 5.
Nice. Did you guys get 5? Yes. Okay. So make sure you label it. N equals 5. You bold 5 games. Okay. If you miscalculated your division, you can verify that some other time. But it is N equals 5, the number of games bold. Okay. All right, so let's move on to the next problem. I'll post these in the notes before the end of the day. Here's the next problem. Let me go and read that to you. Solomon decided to make posters for the student council election. He bought markers that cost 79 cents each and a poster board that cost $1.25. The total cost was $7.57. Write and solve an equation to find the number of markers that Solomon bought. I already have some students come to see me for lunch. It doesn't make any difference if I have more coming to see me for lunch. So who can walk me through this problem? What do you think, Villator? Okay, so you're using M for markers. Okay, I used N, but you could use M. Okay, so 79 cents times the number of markers, M is what you're using. Okay, then what else?
Okay. Plus $1.25.
Okay, and right, so plus the amount for the poster board itself, and then that made the total $7.57. Okay, is everybody good? So here's my equation. And we need to solve this. What's the first step? Who's got the first step? Somebody I haven't heard from. Jonathan, what's my first step to solve this equation? Do you know? Right, so we're going to subtract 125 from both sides. That's the subtraction property of equality. And does anybody know what $7.57 subtracted 125 is? $6.32. And then these are opposites, so they become 0. So this simplifies, and now we have 79 hundredths n equals 6 and 32 hundredths. Okay, now what's the next step? Christian, go ahead.
Then you would divide 600.
We would divide both sides by 79 hundredths. That's the division property of equality. And then the left-hand side becomes 1. And I'm just going to tell you right now, because we're running short on time, this is going to simplify. It gives us a nice round number 8. So we had 8 markers. 1n equals 8. So we had 8 markers that Solomon bought. Okay? Any questions? If you messed up on your division, you're going to need to make sure you know how to do that for tomorrow. Go review that. Okay? And then last part of my lesson. Fill in the missing numbers to make the diagram at the left represent the following situation. A taxi charges a flat fee, and I needed to... A taxi charges a flat fee of $2 plus 50 cents each mile. Your fare is $5. So I rewrote it this way. If it was a whole number, I just dropped off the decimal just to make it easier to work with. So that's $2, that's 50 cents per mile, and then $5 is the total fare. So if I was to rewrite this and fill in these blanks, what would go in my top box? $5 total. What would go over here? 0.5 what? 0.5 m. Okay, so here's my equation. What's the first step? Subtract both sides by? No, 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 no. That's multiplied. So I get to subtract both sides by 2. Okay, are we good? Because this doesn't have a sign, we know the sign is what? This is a positive. So we're going to subtract 2 from both sides, and here's what we get back. Does everybody understand that step? Okay, simplify that further. Here we are. Now what do I do to isolate my m? So we know how many miles. What do I have to do? Isolate my m. Timothy, go ahead. Divide by 0.5. Here we go. And then if you take 3 and divide by 0.5, does anybody know what that is? It is going to be 6. And so the number of miles we drove was 6 miles. Any questions? Okay, so the last 3 problems, this one's easy. Who's got this one? Walk me through. What's the first step? Timothy, what's the first step?
Subtract by 2.
No, we already subtract by 2, so we had to undo subtract by 2. What are we going to do to undo that? We're going to add 2 to both sides. And so what am I left with on, what's my equation going to become?
5p by 4 equals...
No, no, no. What's negative 2 plus 2? It's not minus 4.
0.
It's 0. And then what's 18 plus 2?
20.
20. Does everybody understand how we got that? Okay. And this simplifies to 5p equals 20. Now what's the next step?
Divide by 5.
Divide by 5. And then what's that going to become?
1p equals 4.
Very good. And then that's p equals 4. Okay, this one's a little challenging. What's the fix? Do you guys remember I told you you're going to sometimes see 2 signs in front of a number, right? Or a term. So we need to fix that. This is why I've been trying to prepare you for. What do these 2 signs become, class? Positive. So here's my equation when I rewrite it. Does everybody understand how I rewrite the equation? Yes. Okay. And so how do I solve this? What's the first step, class? Subtract 16 from both sides. And what's that give me back?
84.
84, but what else? What's the rest of it?
7n plus 0 equals 84.
Right, 7n plus 0 equals 84. And when we simplify that, 7n plus 0 is just 7n, so 7n equals 84. How do I isolate my variable n? Divide both sides by 7. What's 84 divided by 7? It's going to be 1n equals 12, and that gives us n equals 12. Now this one looks messy, but it's not. What's the first step to do over here? Subtract 15 from both sides. And so minus 15 plus 15 becomes what? 0. But now we have a minus 17, minus 15. If they're the same signs, do we take the diff sign? If we have the same sign, do we take the sum or the difference? The sum. And what's the answer sign going to be? Whatever they share. No. If it's the same signs, you take the sum, and then you keep the sign, negative 32. Are we good? And then we know this fraction plus 0 is just going to be the fraction. And so how do I get rid of that decimal? What do I have to do? How do I get y by itself? I have to multiply by 4 and 2500ths, both sides. That cancels, gives me this. You have to verify, so y equals negative 136. Do you see why it's negative? Yes. I have a negative times a positive.